Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters the anime is often fondly remembered for its giant monsters, epic moments, and snarky one-liners. But another aspect of the original anime to which even the most rigorous Yu-Gi boomer must admit is its silliness. Goofy hijinks abound and incidents of shenanigans are off the charts. But that's also the source of much of YGODM's charm. And this is what brings us to today's list. As we all know, paper beats rock, rock beats scissors, and scissors beats paper. And we're starting this list off at number 10 with another iconic X beats Y scenario. Catapult Turtle / Guy the Dragon Champion beats Castle of Dark Illusions / Chaos Shield / plus a bunch of Dark Fiends. We're talking about the Duelist Kingdom challenger Yugimoto versus professional eliminator PaniK from episodes 14 and 15. What was already a very long and strange night for the gang, they met Bakura and it was weird, is broken by a scream. It sounds like Mai and they quickly realize it is. She's lost all her starships in one fateful game against an insane clown posse fan named PaniK. When he's not working on his makeup and tinkering with pyrotechnics, more on that in a second, PaniK moonlights for Maximilian Pegasus as an eliminator tasked with weeding weak duelists out of the Duelist Kingdom tournament. But Mai isn't weak, so what happened? Well, PaniK is a special kind of unhinged. His dueling strategy entirely revolves around exploiting his opponent's unhealed trauma, and his ace in the hole is threatening to burn them alive with specially constructed flamethrowers that emerge from his dueling arena. Neither Yugi nor the Pharaoh are particularly impressed with PaniK, and they immediately challenge him to a duel. Thrilled at the prospect of another victim, PaniK is totally down, and shackles Yugi's ankles while threatening him with fire. It's pretty ballistic, but the Yugis remain confident, and the duels begin. PaniK's most important card is the Castle of Dark Illusions, which shrouds his field in darkness. Yugi can't see his opponent's monsters, and when PaniK attacks, the darkness itself appears to devour Yugi's creatures. It's all pretty scary, but while PaniK was successful in deploying these tactics to put pressure on Mai's deep-seated fear of isolation, the Pharaoh is at home in darkness way deeper than anything PaniK can muster. He spends a significant amount of time BMing PaniK, even though the Eliminator threatens multiple times to kill him with fire. Eventually, the balance of the duel swings in Yugi's favor, with swords revealing light temporarily pushing back the darkness. PaniK begins to shore up his defenses, clustering his monsters behind a Chaos Shield that he attaches to Castle of Dark Illusions. As a final defensive maneuver, PaniK summons Metal Guardian to defend his monsters with Chaos Shield and the field power bonus juicing its defensive values up to a perplexing but effective 2795. Yugi just starts making stuff up, and Catapult Turtle now causes Guy the Dragon Champion's attack to climb from 2600 to 3200, but even this isn't enough since Yugi can't attack PaniK's other monsters until he destroys Metal Guardian. This doesn't matter, however, because Yugi isn't attacking a monster. He's not even using Catapult Turtle's TCG effect to burn PaniK's life points. He's using Catapult Turtle to launch his Fusion Dragon into Castle of Dark Illusions' floating rings. Since Castle of Dark Illusions' defense is also 3200, it's hard to articulate what the result of this will be, but also we're well beyond rules by now. Yugi's Dragon Champion is destroyed, but so is the outer ring containing PaniK's floating castle. And when the giant rocks fall, the Chaos Shield holds all of his monsters in place. The cataclysmic event instantly defeats PaniK. And then, when he attempts to retaliate by burning Yugi to a crisp, Yami Yugi activates his Pharaoh powers to survive the flames and crush PaniK's mind. In the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, the rules of the game hadn't yet crystallized, and this made room for all kinds of silly behavior. And although this was already a battle of the sillies with PaniK's Shroud of Darkness, Yami Yugi out-sillied hard when he launched Guy the Dragon Champion into a physical facet of his opponent's monsters rather than the card itself. Overall, Yugi vs PaniK is a good startup hijink to set the tone for the rest of this list. Time for number 9. The world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Exists at the mercies and whims of mega-rich corporate interests that exert enormous amounts of control over political and communal resources, with little thought to the common people. While this aspect of the show is surprisingly realistic, it's also quite silly in practice. After all, Kaiba buys out an entire city for his Battle City tournament, and as we saw with PaniK, Pegasus is literally allowed to hunt people on his private island, or at least hire people too. But perhaps the most ridiculous example of money's power in the world where shadow magic exists is Dart's total takeover of the United States of America. Though his influence stretches over the entire season, the power of Dartz is perhaps most extreme in episodes 168 and 177, where he demonstrates his political capital. But first, a little background. Dartz helms the mysterious Paradis Corporation, a large conglomerate with ownership stakes in companies all over the world. The true purpose of Paradis is to mask the occult activities of its leader, Dartz, and his inner circle of orichalcos wielding motorcycle enthusiasts. During the Waking the Dragons arc, Dartz attempts to harvest a massive number of souls to supplement the stolen power of the Egyptian gods to resurrect the Great Leviathan, a serpent that will devour the world and usher in a new and sinless age for the revived continent of Atlantis. Vital to Dartz's plan is a takeover of both Kaiba Corp and the Industrial Illusions, the latter of which is what leads Yugi and the gang to Pegasus's corporate headquarters in the US of A. Although they have local friends in Rebecca and Dr. Hawkins, Dartz's resources let him purchase an army of militant outlaw bikers, which cause all kinds of problems. But more serious is the political clout afforded by his connections and finances. The crew travels from America West to Florida, where Kaiba Corp keeps its US headquarters. They came here to access Kaiba's supercomputer, but Taya and Tristan have a different plan: warn the local police about the impending invasion of the mini orichalcos monsters. Despite their intense optimism, Dartz got to the police first, and they've already become minions of the orichalcos, even summoning monster soldiers to attack Tristan and Taya. So yes, this does mean the ACAB includes the Seal of Orichalcos. But forget the local cops, this is a serious threat. It's time to call in the United States Air Force. During episode 177, Seto, Kaiba, and the Pharaoh are flying out to Dartz's island to cut off the head of the snake, literally. They momentarily land on a US military aircraft carrier to refuel and rally support. This ultimately doesn't pan out as the commanding officer informs them that his force's hands are tied, as Dartz has total political control over the entire country. But although the United States Air Force is forbidden from directly intervening with Dartz's plans, they can at least spot Kaiba some fuel, which is nice. Although this is totally silly, it ultimately does have to rank on the low end of this list. If Dartz were real, the Great Leviathan and Orichalcos stones as apocalyptic threats would probably actually take a back seat to his world-ending political leverage. After all, who needs a devil snake and ancient magic to end the world when you can accomplish the same result using green paper and made-up numbers on a screen? After the Waking the Dragons arc and the cataclysmic stakes of the Orichalcos story, things slow down a little. For number 8, we're zooming in on the maybe 2 weeks of downtime the gang has after Dartz and before the next ancient sorcerer tries to take over the world. But even if the world is momentarily safe, how can they enjoy their time off when they're stuck in Florida? To save everyone from having to go to the beach, here comes Mokuba Kaiba with the solution. If Yugi and, sure, Joey too, whatever, agree to get involved with the Kaiba Corp Grand Prix as a PR stunt for Kaiba's new Floridian amusement park, Kaiba Land USA, Casey will cover the transportation back home. But Yugi and Joey aren't the only celebrities to take part. In episode 186, we meet the other contenders, including important Yu-Gi-Oh! Lore characters like Ethan Shark, a world-famous doctor, Grandpa Backwards, and Balfrey Ginger. Also participating is Sherlock Holmes, real name Paul McGregor, a duelist specialist who employs deductive reasoning to suss out his opponent's strategies. Despite winning his first round against cowboy musician Shane Jordan, Paul Holmes gets matched against Balfrey Ginger. Sherlock McGregor is a professional super detective, while Balfrey is an amateur magician in a world where real magic exists. At the start of their duel in episode 190, Paul tells Balfrey that he's clued in on the magician's strategies, but the detective turns out to be jumping to conclusions because by episode 191, the case of the cosplayer who sucks at dueling ends with Balfrey emerging victorious to send Paul the Sherlock wannabe home. If you don't remember Balfrey either, that's probably because he was almost immediately exorcised from the tournament by Siegfried von Schrödinger following his win against the world's greatest detective. The KC Grand Prix is another anime-only filler arc, and one of the show's chances to really flex its silly muscles. If the villains win, the world won't get destroyed. Kaiba will still be a little embarrassed, but everything will be mostly fine. But even more embarrassing is the performance of Sherlock Paul McGregor Holmes. Total flop, Sir Detective. While we're sort of on the subject of people pretending to have magic powers in a world where they are in fact super real and do influence daily events, let's dive back to the early days of Duelist Kingdom for spot number 7. When the crew first met season contender My Valentine in episode 3, she's a long way from the dynamo duelist she would become. She's still got her harpies and her witty banter, but season 1 Mai allegedly had something else: extrasensory perception, or ESP. Shorthand for psychic abilities, Mai would use her claims of ESP to throw her opponents off balance. Her trick was to always know her cards front and back, playing with her cards entirely face down as a demonstration of her mind powers. The observant will note that she employs all of this for no actual on-field benefit beyond psyching out her opponent. If this seems like a lot of effort for little to no reward, well, that's right. In the long history of Yu-Gi-Oh characters cheating, Mai's antics are perhaps the most confusing. Arcana cut the edges of his cards so that his opponents would usually place a copy of Dark Magician to the top while cutting his deck. Seeker also shaved the edges of his Exodia pieces so he'd always know where they were in his deck. Aspa had his siblings use binoculars to spy for him, and Siegfried von Schordener hacked into Kaiba land computers. Maybe Mai is the most fair cheater, but that's because her method is ridiculous. Let's look at what she actually does. In order to identify all of her cards, she employs an aroma technique where all of her cards possess a unique scent that she can use to distinguish them. This is absolutely mind-boggling behavior. Her deck must smell crazy. Soaking every card in a different perfume requires both a wild amount of perfume, and also, wouldn't they all meld together in her deck? Why didn't Rex Raptor smell the craziness of her cards when him and Mai dueled in episode 3? Joey could smell her cards outside in an open field from the other side of the dueling arena in episode 6. Although Mai eventually drops her Aroma ESP charade following her defeat by Joey Wheeler, the entire act was wildly silly to begin with. She might not have won Duelist Kingdom or Battle City, but for being one of this series' most flagrant and fragrant cheaters, Mai takes home number 7 on this list. When people think about the Yugi gang, Tristan Taylor is often remembered as the guy who's bad at dueling. His favorite card is Cyber Commander, and his other cards of note are Super Roboru and Lava Battle Guard. But while Tristan is usually somewhat laughable as a hero, he also got possessed and turned evil, and it's weird that it happened twice. For his double possession heel turns, Tristan Taylor but evil takes number 6 on this list. Halfway through the Battle City Finals, everyone decided to take a break for a filler arc. Noah Kaiba, the tragic and late biological son of Gozaburo Kaiba, pilots the Kaiba Corp airship into a hidden sea base and makes everyone dive into a virtual world where he has the powers of a vengeful god, and the tools of his retribution are the Big Five. With their brains lost in cyberspace since the last Kaiba filler arc, the bodies of former Casey employees Gansley, Crump, Nesbitt, Johnson, and Letcher withered and died. In order to escape cyber prison, they need to take over the living bodies of Yugi and friends by besting them in duels. At this, they are generally unsuccessful. In fact, the only non-Big Five member to lose a duel is Tristan Taylor, who somehow manages to go out first during a 3-on-1 duel against Nesbitt. In episode 108, the new Tristan Taylor is revealed. With his body piloted by ex-Kaiba Corp engineer Nesbitt, Neo Tristan attacks the gang with a wooden sword, and is oddly unfazed by Joey Wheeler tackling him through a wall. He drives a motorcycle and kidnaps a Mokuba and later duels against Yugi and Joey at the same time, with all 5 members of the Big Five controlling his body at once. This gambit predictably fails, and at the end of the Virtual World arc, the original Tristan Taylor returns, but not for good. Way later during the Dawn of the Duel arc, where the spirits of the Millennium Puzzle and Ring wage a complicated shadow game in ancient Egypt, career bad guy proxy Tristan Taylor gets possessed by Yami Bakura and begins influencing the decisions of little Yugi and his time-displaced friends. This culminates in a duel between Yugi and Yami Bakura, who has fully taken over Tristan, erupting from his body in Bakura form. After this duel, and the reveal of Yugi's new ace monster, Gandor the Dragon of Destruction, Tristan returns again, for good this time, or at least until we get another nostalgia movie called Yu-Gi-Oh! The Dark Rebirth of Tristan Taylor. But enough about Tristan, it's time to move on to a more important classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Character, like Weevil Underwood and Rex Raptor, a sentence that no one else has ever said. Number 5 on this list goes to the time that Yugi & Co. accidentally trafficked Weevil and Rex across international borders. Weevil Underwood and Rex Raptor's fall from grace is pretty well documented across the Duel Monsters series. They start out at the top of their game and are quickly toppled, with Weevil being the first contestant eliminated from Duelist Kingdom and Rex Raptor getting sent home by Joey Wheeler. They don't fare much better in Battle City, where Joey defeats Weevil and Rex loses off-screen to Espa Rosa. During the Waking the Dragons arc, they lose a duel in their souls to Gurumo, also off-screen, but are restored by the Pharaoh. They immediately repay this debt by dueling Yugi and Joey again and losing again, and things don't improve for them going forward. But what Weevil and Rex lack in dueling acumen, they make up for by being actually kind of good at petty crime. First, they place a wiretap or a bug on the gang, and this is how they learn that all of the main characters are going to America to visit Pegasus at Industrial Illusions headquarters to get to the bottom of this Orichalcos monster nonsense. Their plan is simple but effective. Since they are both somewhat small humans, they curl up together inside a big bag and smuggle themselves onto Yugi's flight by pretending to be their cargo. Shockingly, this works. Weevil and Rex sneak into America. Sadly, their plan eventually falls off when their bag falls off a transport van and they get stranded in the streets of San Francisco. It takes them almost no time to get mugged, but they're then saved by Duke Devlin, who miraculously shows up and throws dice at the thief until he leaves Weevil and Rex alone. Under the impression that he's helping out some of Yugi's friends, Duke Devlin drives Weevil and Rex around for a while. Wow, very silly. Spoiler alert, we'll be talking about the Waking the Dragons arc yet again very soon. For the number 4 spot on this list, we return to the lawless days of Duelist Kingdom when the game hardly had rules and the wildest plays were specifically we return to episode 7, Attack from the Deep, when Yugimoto dueled Mako Tsunami. Fresh off of his victory against Mai where he sniffed out her aroma strategy, Joey's nose continues to put in work as he smells food cooking in the direction of the ocean. This is what leads the gang to encounter Mako Tsunami, an ocean duelist extraordinaire. At first, Mako seems pissed that Joey, Yugi, and Co. were about to eat his fish, but then he's actually friendly and tells them sure they can have some. After a light meal, Yugi gets ready to go, and that's when Mako does another 180. He throws a fishing spear at Yugi's feet and challenges the shaken child to a duel. Informing him of the delicious food was a trap to lure competitors into oceanside matches. None of this has anything to do with the ridiculous dueling antics that really earn these events their spot at number 4, but it is wild and definitely deserving of a mention. During the match, Mako's reasons for baiting duelists to the ocean become quickly evident. Not only do Mako's water monsters get a power bonus, but they're also obscured by Umi's depths. If this seems confusingly similar to PaniK's Shroud of Darkness, well, at least monsters in hiding are easy for the animators to draw. Some goofy stuff happens where Yugi tries to use Feral Imp and Horn of the Unicorn to attack an ocean dweller, but Mako's normal monster jellyfish actually has the inexplicable effect of neutralizing all electrical attacks while getting even stronger. So take that, Yugi. You can forget about using Summon Skull. But Yugi actually has other plans. They involve summoning Silver Fang and using Full Moon to equip to increase its stats by a laughable 300 points. Immediately, Silver Fang is washed away by Megu's Kairushin, a mighty serpent whose tidal attack advances Umi so that Yugi only has one zone of land to use for his monsters. Unfortunately for Mako, this is all Yugi needs. Even with Silver Fang gone, Full Moon is still hanging around for some reason, and Yugi switches his giant soldier of stone to attack mode. At first, Mako is amazed. What is Yugi going to do with that? The sea is much too powerful and its denizens far too vicious. But Yugi isn't attacking Mako's monsters. He's using Giant Soldier of Stone to attack his own targetless equip spell, Full Moon. Apparently, this has severe knock-on effects for the tides, causing Mako's ocean to recede. This leaves all of the fish gasping for water and rendering them vulnerable to magical Curse of Dragons Char Roast. But what really elevates Yugi's duel against Mako over other similar show shenanigans is that you can pretty much approximate their duel in the actual TCG. First, there's the continuous spell Attack the Moon, first releasing as a super rare in 2012 set Abyss Rising. Attack the Moon allows you to destroy a spell or trap controlled by your opponent once per turn when the battle position of one of your rock monsters is changed. If the effect and name aren't clear enough references to Yugi's anime Moonstrike, the artwork really drives the message home. The card depicts Soldier of Stone from a daunting upward angle as the giant thrusts its sword into the moonlit sky. Unfortunately, this card was a little too slow to see much competitive use in the TCG, but in Duel Links it was sometimes included in Triomid deck lists. And there are actually even more cards to talk about here, since Mako cards were redesigned for the 2022 set of Legendary Duelist Duels from the Deep. This would include a new electric jellyfish that can negate spells and monster effects while increasing its stats, an improved Doom Kraken that can suddenly activate from hand to bounce an opponent's monster, and of course Ocean Dragon Lord Kairushin. If this level 5 Sea Serpent lands on your field while Umi is active, there won't be much land left. Both players are placed under a very literal floodgate where only one non-water monster can exist on each side of the field. Because this is a passive effect that doesn't require activation, when Ocean Dragonlord Kairyu hits, your opponent must send monsters to the graveyard to meet the conditions before they can even react, barring a powerful counter trap like Solemn Judgment that can negate the entire summon. This strategy, known as Umi Control, was never meta, but has seen some competitive placements. But enough about cards. For number 3, let's talk about Seto Kaiba and his number 1 hater, the Orichalco's biker, Alister. To provide proper context for this entry, we've got to go back even farther than Duelist Kingdom. Before Seto took over Kaiba Corp, the company was run by Gozaburo Kaiba, the mega-rich industrialist who made his millions creating weapons. This sordid corporate history would mostly be ignored by the anime until the Waking the Dragons filler arc, which decided to explore this ripple effect of the missiles launched by KC before its Duel Monster days. Enter Alister. He comes from an unnamed country torn apart by war. Though the root of the sectarian conflict is left vague and unrealized, Alister is smart enough to note that Gozaburu's weapons development company is supplying resources to both sides, super inflating the humanitarian cost of the conflict for shareholder profit. That's another way of saying that a ton of innocent people died, including Alister's family, to make Gozaburo Kaiba rich. This is what led Alister to swear vengeance against Kaiba Corp. Or it sort of is. Dartz, who we already covered in this list for a total control of the United States of America, from local beat cops to military brass, is also a master in disguise. Using magic illusion powers, Dartz took on the appearance of Gozaburo and orchestrated the attack that led to the demise of Alister's little brother, Mikey. Unfortunately, this bad guy reveal totally upends all of the interesting thematic direction of Seto Kaiba's story arc during the season. Gozaburo might have built his company on facilitating war, but Seto quickly dismantled his stepfather's legacy after deposing him. The elder Kaiba brother blew up misanthropic engineer Nesbitt's research lab and pivoted the direction of the company out of weapons manufacturing and into entertainment, crafting high-end gaming gear and building a fun little theme park, Kaibaland. From a pragmatic perspective, Kaiba has done almost more than any other living person to demilitarize and improve the material conditions of his world. But on the other hand, Kaiba Corp's new direction and more benign inventions are still the result of blood money, and it's not hard to understand why Alister would find the whitewash of the Kaiba name infuriating. Alister's sins of the father approach is interesting as it applies to Kaiba, since there was no love lost between Seto and Gozaburo. However, Seto still bears the Kaiba name and utilizes his familial wealth. To what extent should Seto Kaiba take on the burden of responsibility for Gozaburo's crimes? Does defanging one of the world's major arms dealers constitute taking responsibility? Does the fact that Seto Kaiba simply does not care impact the answers to either of the previous questions? Kaiba's aloof nature is what makes Alister's challenge during Waking the Dragons interesting. How strong is Kaiba's denial placed against a living avatar, the human cost of Kaiba Corp? Here, the anime takes advantage of a filler arc to poke at a fascinating story for one of its most important characters. And then, it doesn't. Alister's vendetta against Kaiba Corp and jaded understanding of the world is revealed to be the result of Dart's careful manipulation, allowing all of the previous interesting questions to go completely unanswered, with no meaningful change or revelation on the part of any character. But the silliest aspect is that whether Dartz pretended to be Gozaburo on any given day or not, he just was doing the thing that Gozaburo already does. Presumably, there are other pre-Seto KC survivors scattered around the globe. There's probably another Alister waiting, and another, but we're just going to have to make like the show and ignore them as we move on to the number 2. It's common knowledge in Yu-Gi-Oh! That a skillful pilot can realize their card's full offensive potential. But when it comes to card jutsu, Seto Kaiba is no pilot, he's a god. The number 2 spot for silliest Duel Monsters anime occurrence goes to Seto Kaiba's deadly card throwing abilities. We catch our first glimpse of Kaiba's extreme card powers in episode 20, following his arrival at Duelist Kingdom after escaping the hitman that Pegasus and the Big Five sent for him during their takeover of Kaiba Corp. Seto advances on Castle Pegasus by foot. He opens the locket where he keeps Moguba's picture and is suddenly waylaid by professional hair goon Kimo. In the English dub, Kimo sticks Kaiba with an invisible gun. But in the original version, the firearm is very real. But unfortunately for Kimo, he brought a gun to a card fight. After informing Kimo that he will pay for his betrayal, Seto leaps into action, slicing his copy of Gaku Tenno Megami between the gun's hammer and body proper. He even berates Kamo for damaging such a rare card before throwing an elbow to the gut and dumping the goon on the ground. The next major display of Kaiba's abilities would come in episode 78 at the finale of Yugi's death duel against Joey in the Battle City Harbor. Controlled by Merrick Ishtar using the powers of the Millennium Rod, both Joey and Teo were used to ensure Yugi's compliance with the deadly duel. If any attempts were made to interfere with the match, Merrick's rare hunters had orders to release a crane-suspected cargo crate over the space where Teo was restrained, resulting in her grisly, crushing demise. But Seto Kaiba has never been afraid of action, and hates being told what to do. After the Yugi/Joey duel ends and both players' life points hitting 0, the gang rushes to save them from the icy water. Serenity tears off her blindfold and dives into the bay, and Kaiba uses this moment of distraction to send a Blue Eyes White Dragon card hurtling through the air to impale the hand of the rare hunter operating the crane's release. Several scenes here are erased from the dub, including the card embedded in the rare hunter's hand and Kaiba's lament over how he's too good at drawing and got goon blood on his favorite card. Interestingly, in the dub, he always knew he was throwing his blue eyes, but in the original he hoped it was something else. You might think messing with Kaiba is a bad idea because of his deeply vengeful nature and infinite resources, but really it's because he can end your life at any moment with just a piece of cardboard from an absurdly far distance. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a fairly complicated game with lots of rules, and for the most part, the anime kind of ignores a lot of them in service of furthering the story and building up climactic duels. And that's why number 1 on this list of silly things from Duel Monsters anime is the time the show actually took the time to explain one of the game's more complex qualities, chain linking and how to resolve them. This development occurred during the Kaiba Corp Grand Prix held in the newly constructed Kaiba Land theme park. Episode 189 cataloged the duel between Rebecca Hawkins and Vivian Wong. As usual, the Yugi gang gathered at the premiere of the match to commentate and cheer their support. And in this case, actually explain the arcane rules of the game they've all dedicated their lives to playing. The first few turns sees Vivian take an early lead in board presence, with both Kung Fu Nyan Nyan and Master Kiyoshi outnumbering Rebecca's lone Fire Princess. But although she's down in monster quantity, this board state actually favors Rebecca, who flips Gravity Bind to stop Vivian from attacking, while slowly burning away her life points using Fire Princess's effect response to the standby phase life point gain provided by the discarded Murray the Fallen. Recognizing that she's been locked, Vivian tries to get rid of Gravity Bind with Mystical Space Typhoon, only for Rebecca to chain Imperial Order, a floodgate continuous trap that negates the effects of all spell cards. But before the chain begins to resolve, Rebecca self-chains her quick play Scapegoat spell to her own trap. With the chain fully established and having no more added effects, resolution begins with the most recent link descending down to the initial activation. First, Scapegoat summons 4 sheep tokens to Rebecca's field, and then Imperial Order takes effect. Because Scapegoat resolves before Imperial Order, Rebecca's spell is spared the negation. But because Mystical Space Typhoon was activated prior and therefore resolves after Imperial Order, Vivian's spell is negated, and Gravity Bind is spared. In a show where giant rock monsters can attack the ocean by proxy of a full moon, we also have a very comprehensive demonstration of a core gameplay mechanic that can be difficult for new players to grasp. But where things get really silly is, somewhat predictably, when Joey Wheeler gets involved. Confused by chain mechanics, the veteran duelist at the top of his game is unsure of why Rebecca's Scapegoat wasn't nullified by her own Imperial Order. Luckily, Yugi is there to explain the exchange. Although much of his explanation was cut from the dub, this scene, while still silly, also serves as interesting character development by contrasting Yugi and Joey's dueling styles. Yugi is a careful planner. He plans ahead and sets traps, and his preference for rock monsters embodies his more stalwart battle strategies. Joey, meanwhile, duels primarily with his gut. His warrior monsters are representative of his moxie and passion. He isn't afraid to take risks and make a blunder or two because he knows he's going to get right back up and keep slugging. In the world of Yu-Gi-Oh!, neither style is correct per se, but it is goofy that only Yugi was able to intuit the actual mechanics of Duel Monsters. This scene is a really funny one. It's a little ridiculous, but also character development and also potentially useful for teaching anime viewers how to play the real-life game. For its multifaceted nature, the Kaiba Corp Grand Prix chaining tutorial takes number 1. Alright, and that's the list. But there are so many more silly moments from the Duel Monsters anime, easily enough for a second list. If you have certain scenes you'd like to see given a spotlight, or if you have ideas for future videos just like this one, I'd love to hear from you down in the comments.